Have you ever wondered what goes through your therapist's mind? Or what's going on with therapists in the midst of a pandemic? How are they doing? Or even like, what's the reason they are in the role that they're in? Today, we're going to explore that and much more with our panel of mental health experts. Welcome. Hey, y'all, come on in. We have an amazing panel of mental health professionals today for you all. These ladies are CEOs, they're licensed professional counselors supervisors, but most of all, they are women who are dedicated to prioritizing their mental health and their self-care. We'll be right back. Do you have a story to tell? Wait. We all have a story to tell. If you are ready to tell your story as it relates to your mental health and the journey, the struggle, the management, the awareness, the lack thereof, we want you at Am I Crazy with Lashasta Bell. And what about sponsorship? Oh, thanks for asking. Because there's also the opportunity for sponsorship. Do you have a product? Do you have an event that you want to shout to the world? If so, check out our sponsorship. Same place as the guest form. See you soon.
Today's episode is presented by Sabrina Cross.
So as they say, I got all my people with me today, y'all. It is so exciting. I'm excited. Like, I think I've been a little jittery all day. Like, my people coming. And we're in a whole pandemic, so we haven't been really getting together. So we all excited. And when I say I have my people, this panel encompasses mental health professionals. Every single one of us have a private practice, or we work in mental health in some capacity, and it's just amazing. So I'm so appreciative that y'all showed up here for us just to chop it up with the people, So I appreciate you, Jenai and Danielle and Keona. So that's what we're here. We're just here to tell our stories and give the people some gems that they can tuck in their front and back pockets when they need to.
Absolutely.
So when you think about your entry into mental health, or when you decided okay, this is what I'm going to be doing with my life, at least part of the time, what brought that about?
Well, for me, I'll say I actually started with the goal of going into medicine, right? Physical medicine, right? So went to med school, left med school, and then was like, now what, right? But I knew that I still wanted to help people. And so rather than medicine, it became mental health. And once I got into graduate school, I was like, oh, this is where I was supposed to be all along, right? It was never supposed to be med school. So that was huge for me, that transition into mental health. And then once I got going, it was kind of like, off to the races, right? That this is where you're supposed to be, and you feel the calling, right, to help people through mental health.
Wow. So how did you leave med school? I know how you left, but let's just be honest. In our culture, in our community, it's an expectation of certain things. And when you get to a certain point, once we get that bachelor's degree, most folks looking around like, you finna get that doctorate, you gonna do, and then when you say, oh, well, I'm leaving med school for counseling, how was that? How was that even received?
It was really interesting. My extended family, everybody knew I wanted to be a doctor, right? Age 7, right? Jenai's going to be a pediatrician. And get to med school, do that. And in actuality, I hit some really difficult times. So my grandmother passed. Both my parents were downsized because they worked for the same company. And then I lived with my brother when I was in med school, and he got laid off. So it was all this kind of turmoil at once. And that would be my, what I would say was my major depressional episode, right? And I was like, I can't, no, Right. And so everybody kind of got it because of all that was happening in my life, but they were now like, Jenai, what are you going to do now? You've been wanting to be a doctor since you were 7, right? So now what? And that's when I say me and Jesus had this conversation, and I was like, Jesus, you told me doctor, and now I know what I'm going to do. So now you got to tell me. And he was like, look, child, go on over there and you're going to be fine. It was kind of one of those types of, I put forth application to one graduate school and one graduate school only. If I don't get in, and I don't know what I want to do, clearly I got it.
Clearly you got in.
Here we are.
Right. Wow. Yeah, look, that's a whole situation when you had that conversation with Jesus, like, look at here. What you mean? This ain't it. Like, nice. Look, that was me in this show. I'm like, what you mean? I'm not going to be on Oprah. Like, I'm going to be the host? Because I had thought my vision, Lord, I thought you had it mixed up when you showed it to me 5 years ago. So I get it. So Danielle, when you think about your journey into getting into this position of being a mental health professional, what ignited it for you? What was your turning point? What was your pivot?
So actually being a counselor just kind of fell in my lap because when I went to college, I was going to be a doctor. I was going to do med, pre-med. And then at some point, so my major started off as biochemistry and I switched to zoology. And I really love zoology. It was only zoology because at the time my school didn't have biology. I love the way the body works and the mind and things like that. And so at some point, I realized that being a doctor wasn't for me. Like, I don't know, maybe it's the sick people. I don't know. I don't know. But it didn't sit well. And I went through a series of different, I love animals. And then it was zoology. Not zoology, veterinarian. But then that didn't go well. And then I always had this desire to work with kids. And so even as I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, every summer I would come back to Houston because I went to OU. I would come back to Houston and do a summer program and with some low income kids. And it was the same kind of summer enrichment program that I went through when I was a younger kid. And so I would get there, we'll have this whole summer camp thing with kids. We'll do projects, we'll do programs and field trips. And I graduated and I remember telling my counselor, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do because I don't want to do research for zoology and I don't want to work in a zoo. And so she was like, well, why don't you be a counselor? You've been working with these kids for so long. She was at LPC and she was like, you can be at LPC and have programs with the kids and just do it all the time. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like something I want to do. And so it just so happened that my school didn't have exact deadlines. It was a free-flowing program. So it was like whenever you decided to start, you just start. And I was like, okay, well, I'll start now. And so I started and things just started falling into place, learning about the different theories and modalities and child abuse and development and things like that. Everything just started falling in place. And I was like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be.
This is my space.
Yes.
This is my space. And now I get more of the love of neurobiology that we share and how we can go for days talking about the brain and not tire. Because, you got that medical foundation of
Yes, we did a lot of cell biology and microbiology and then brain work and then behavioral analysis in zoology. So that's where a lot of that comes from.
Yes. And so the sick people are, still unwellness, but not in the physical, but in the mental.
The mental was more aligned with me than physically.
Good. Thank you. Look, I'm learning my people even more. So Keona, when you think about your space and how you found yourself as a mental health professional, what did it for you?
For me, school, I didn't really have a career path of what I want to be when I grow up kind of thing, but education was always an expectation of me. I'm a first generation college kid. And so I only applied to HBCUs. I got into Xavier. I started off as a business major, accounting. I am not a numbers person by far, but it was my end. And so, your freshman year, you got to take all of the classes in general ed. I took a general psych class, and the professor was W.E.B. Du Bois' granddaughter. And so sitting at her feet, learning about a field that I never knew about. I never knew what psychology was, but I've always been a questioner of why do we do this or why did you do that, and I always ask why and what's the purpose. So just sitting in that class made so much sense. So I dropped out of accounting, gave up my scholarship, didn't tell no parent.
Oh boy!
And came back second semester as a psychology major. And still to this day, I don't know if my mom even realized what happened. but every class that she offered, I took. All the other professors were really good too. But I really fell in love with the study of psychology, and that was my entry at HBCU.
Yeah, look, and we share that because I really didn't have a career path either. My mama just said, you need to go to college. I'm a first generation as well. And so I ended up at Dillard. Mind you, we right down the street from each other. 20-something years ago, didn't even know it. Right. And my major was psychology because I knew people always wanted my help. And would be like, what I do about my boyfriend? I'm like, I don't know. I don't even have one. Like, why you asking me? And so for years, I carried it like a burden. Like I didn't want to be the person that spoke up or said anything or problem solved, but it kept coming to me. Yeah. And I'm like, And so I transferred from Dillard to Prairie View, and I also changed my major. I was on the sidewalk walking with a friend, and she's like, I want to introduce you to Professor such and such. And he was a sociology major. And so in a 5-7 minute conversation, it changed my major from psychology to social work. And I'm like, oh, I love this. And I really had to have a come to Jesus with God too. Because I'm like, look, you want me to help the people, but it's exhausting to help the people. So what am I going to do if this is what keeps coming at my feet? Because even at Dillard, the food was gross. And it was like, you should be on the presidential advisory board to get the food changed. Like, why? Mind you, I showed up and I did it. I wrote an English paper and be like, here go my paper for this. And I'm going to use the same paper over here, because if it's a persuasive essay, I'm persuading them to change the food over here, And so then the next thing you know, I'm in education because I was in social work, kept going to the school, working with the kids, and found this little behavior classroom. And I'm like, oh, you get to do behavior and teach? Right. Like, I'm such a nerd. I got so excited. I'm like, I want to do that now. And then the next thing you know, somebody was like, well, you should be a counselor, a school counselor. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm married. I got the kid. I got this career job. The next thing you know, I'm in grad school at Prairie View working on my counseling degree. And it's just one thing after another. Like you said, Danielle, just kind of all fell into place. And it's like, okay, if it keeps falling into place, or even with you, Jenai, one school only, and that's it. When it keeps falling in place, it's like you feel it in your gut.
Yeah. It feels right.
It does.
Yeah. And so that's how we all got here. We all got our different stories, but I think the one thing that resonates is that we were intuitive. We trusted that gut, but also the people around us kind of, along the way. Well, your people didn't know, but that's a whole thing. So,
well, my people didn't know either.
Oh,
so
look at that.
Yeah, they were just like, "What are you doing today?" This is what I'm doing.
My people kind of expect that of me. They just let me do me.
But it works out. It works out. So when we think mental health, and we all have our own perspectives or our own areas that we work in, but for the audience, when we talk about it's a pandemic, the social injustices, the presidential election, everybody everywhere is probably feeling one moment away from what they would say is a nervous breakdown.
Right.
And so when you think about that in your own journey, how are you guys feeling? As mental health professionals out here in these streets, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Whew. You know what? Yeah, let's take a collective breath because that is a lot. It's a struggle. A lot of days I'm glad to have community with friends who understand what we all go through. We have our group chats and texts that we always check in with each other. I watch a lot of Netflix, all the comedy specials. I stay on top. I try to have as much laughter and like increase that type of energy around me as much as possible, because work is exhausting. You have to hold space for the world who is suffering in a part. And if you're going to be here, we have to be here. So I have to disconnect, text y'all. I've been painting in my house. Every wall is a different color. So just having some, I think, creative outlets. I'm not the most creative person, but having just some space to just throw it all on the wall or throw it into laughter, and that's been my savior through this, my saving grace through this pandemic.
Nice. So we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, the rest of us will share how we're doing in this pandemic, in this 2020, 2021 world. We offer face-to-face and virtual counseling throughout the state of Texas. www.ichoosemecounseling.com. So we're back. And we were in, first the break. I'm just gonna tell y'all the foolery that happens on the break. One day, I promise, I'm gonna post some behind the scenes on my YouTube channel on the break, but just not today. So we were talking about being a mental health professional right now with all that's going on. And so Keona was sharing the things that she does and how she's felt in this pandemic. What about you ladies?
For me, it's been heavy. Alongside with doing work in the practice, I also work in the psych center, a psych ward. So that's just continuous because that's a hospital. There was no quarantine for me. There was no break. It's just going. And it wasn't until maybe like this past December, that's when I finally got some significant time off, because it's just going. And it's been heavy seeing increase in numbers of people at the psych center. And then also just seeing the world around. It's been very heavy. Times where, don't even want to get out of bed, lots on my mind, can't sleep. One thing that helps, like Keona was saying, is just connecting with people, texting, trying my best, as safely as we can to, see virtually, see in person from far away, we sit that through like this. So,
and then washing our hands real quick.
Right. Yeah. Right. No offense. But it's been, that's been my biggest help. And then going on this kind of, I guess you can say reflective self-learning journey, that just was in due time. It was just time, reflecting on a lot of different things, learning a lot about myself, trying new things, I started diving into yoga real heavy. And so that has been something that really helped during this time.
Okay, cool. Jenai, what you got?
Absolutely. So I would say I found, again, everything increased, right, over this pandemic season, especially for us in mental health. Like, we didn't slow down, we picked up. And interestingly enough, finding the balance between new endeavors and new opportunities, right, that keep me excited and that keep me motivated, that's been, like, I think the saving grace from all of the tomfoolery that we have seen and experienced in our nation during this time, right? And then also having outlets, right, to talk to people and be like, you think it's crazy too? Like, yo, what is, huh? Right? Like, being able to have those moments in between those things that keep me motivated and keep me excited and keep me going. I think that's probably been the way that I've gotten through 2020 and not lost my own mind.
Look. And so on top of the whole pandemic, I had a whole life crisis, so, it's like February hits and I'm like, and then March come and it's like, I'm like, hold up. And then I move into the office space the weekend that the world shuts down. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And so I was just like, I don't know. What do I put my head under the covers and not come out?
Right.
What is it that I do? And then I just had to finally just say, okay, you know what? You get real about it. You welcome people in and you let them help you carry the weight. You increase your transparency, which Lord knows, I thought I was already translucent. And I'm like, oh, well, no, not as much as what was needed in 2020. And then seeing my own therapist, like keeping my regular appointments were life-saving because it gave me an opportunity to not focus on the client's problems, but to really take some time with mine. And the more balanced I became in that, it helped me, with the others. Now, sometimes it just took a lot of prayer because I'm just be honest, when people don't believe like you believe and there's extremities in the beliefs, it makes it harder for us to show up and do our job because, our biases code says we got to check them at the door. We got to leave them out. And so it took more energy. So I started finding myself putting more space in between clients, seeing less clients, not having a full day because I couldn't hold space. Like you said, it was hard to hold space and different points in times, I just couldn't. And I traveled safely, I'm like, look, month 1, okay. Month 2, we okay. Month 3, I don't know if I'm gonna be okay. By month 4, I'm like, okay, we can drive in the car. Because as you guys know, traveling is one of the things that I do just to completely unplug and remove myself. And the thought of not being able to do that was creating so much more stress. And I had to just like, okay, let's pivot and see how I can do so and do it safely. Right. And so each time I would travel, I would go virtual, which going virtual was a whole nother, and I know for you, seeing the babies and virtually, that was a whole nother thing. But I think all in all that, and then having the connection too, having the text threads and the phone calls, and some of y'all done heard tears on the other line, like, I can't do this. I just can't, it's too heavy. And sometimes being able to just get it out without judgment is all that you need. Because of course I showed up and I did it and I helped the client and did it well, but it's just in that moment, it's like, how are we dealing with this on top of all of this? So yeah, and I imagine that if we feel this way,
come on now, everybody else.
And we have tools. And so when we think about tools, we had a few questions. So we're going to answer a few of the questions. And one of the questions that was posed was like, how do you manage the anxiety and depression without medication?
It's a good one. I often tell my clients, like, these are then lifestyle changes. If we're not going to do psychotropics, which you don't have to, right? Then you've got to do something, right? So let's look at how you're eating. Let's look at how you're sleeping. Let's look at your movement, right? Are you working out? Are you getting those endorphins that help with that? My passion is holistic mental health, right? Y'all know that's my buzzword. So we talk about like the food that you eat, the comfort food probably is not as comforting as you think it's going to be, right? It tastes good now. In about 45 minutes, you're going to feel that crash, right? That comes with some of that stuff. So I talk about some of the lifestyle changes that people can make when it comes to managing their mental health and all of the symptoms that we can have with mood disorders.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of go along the same lines. Lifestyle changes, routines, and consistency. Big thing about it is consistency. You got to stay at it. You got to build this pattern. And even if you fall off one day, that's fine. Life happens. But getting back on it and getting back on that routine and that pattern that you're on helps. Because when your body and your mind kind of knows what's about to happen, it's more equipped to be like, okay, I'm good with this. And then if something unplanned does happen, your body's like, oh, okay, well, everything else was in order, so we're still good. And so it's just that routine. And I know the pandemic took everybody out of routine, so there was like a long while of just, what do I do? What do I do? And so now we're kind of getting back to the point to where we're picking up what's our new norm, and our bodies is getting back used to it. So
yes. Keona, you got something to add to that?
of course, I agree with Danielle and Jenai. And then I would also add, and for a while, we have to do things mechanically because your brain will remember. If you're having a hard time getting out of bed, then you mechanically put your leg out the covers, put your other leg out the covers. You have to, by habit, move, and your brain will catch up and get you moving. Same thing, my appetite's low, I haven't eaten in 2 days. Mechanically, you know how to make a sandwich. You present your body with food, it will eat. It's not gonna starve itself. So all that is kind of biology. We're not designed to die. We're not designed to kill ourselves. Right. So, and all those other things.
Yes. And then, I'm gonna mix it up and throw that sleep in there, because who can talk about sleep all day? Me, in the brain. And so for me, when I talk with clients, of course, the holistic, the exercise, the endorphins, but we talk about sleep and how sleep is the cornerstone of decreasing the anxiety activation level. But it's also the first thing that's disrupted when you stress, when you worried. And so I really work with them to cultivate their rest ethic and their sleep hygiene, because once they are sleeping well, now the brain gets to recover from the emotions and the learning and the memory of the day. But if you only sleep in 3 hours, you haven't processed what happened in the 8 hours you're awake. And so literally you carrying 5 hours of stress into the next day. And that leads to heightened anxiety. And then we know once you get anxious enough, then the depression rolls right in, It's like they two first cousins. Yeah. Sometimes they feel like kissing cousins. Like, y'all ain't supposed to be here at the same time. What you doing? So that's how those are the many ways that you can manage anxiety and depression or depressed mood or anxiousness without medication.
One thing I do want to add is that as you're going through these changes and you're trying new things, is give yourself grace.
Yes.
Because it's not gonna just happen like that. True. It took a minute for your body to develop this pattern, because your body is going to it's gonna survive off of what you give it. And if all you have is what you did, then your body's like, okay, cool, that's what I got. I'm gonna make it work. and then it's a pattern. And then as you learn and you're out of that setting to where you no longer have to survive like that, and you're changing these patterns and you're starting something new, there's gonna be some hiccups. There's gonna be some roadblocks. And so giving yourself some grace as you change.
That's good. That's a good add-on. That self-compassion is huge. Once you learn that, it makes so many other things easier. I heard someone say earlier about motivation, and we had that question come up, like, how do you motivate the teenagers and the kids with virtual school and decreasing extracurricular activities and just goals in general, especially the high schoolers, I would say, are being impacted more because they're so sedentary with online school. Like literally, I just got to hop in for 15 minutes at 10 o'clock. And so they sleep until 9:55. Right. Yeah. He's like, we're here. So what would you guys say to parents about helping their kids with all of the changes and the disruption of routine due to the pandemic?
I think because I have a teenager at home, and you have just spoke her life. Giving grace. None of these kids have been through this ever before in life. So it's hard to discipline, make them do what they've never been able to do before. So managing your own expectations of what these kids have to deal with. That's number one. Secondly, as much or to the extent that you can, provide centers, spaces in your house where they have some transition. Don't let your kids go to school from the bed. You have to get up, you have to wash your face, get dressed, and you have to move to this place or this space because this is designed for schoolwork. Then you have to get up and you have to move and you have to go to this space because this space is designed where you can do activity. And so it's recreating their world internally. And so the motivation part, when they have expectation of, I have to be here at this time and here over at that time, that extrinsic motivation will come. Intrinsic is different. That's them motivating themselves. They have to have the will to. But yeah, if you create the expectations, make them move around, and however that's has worked in my home.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, you have those structured pieces, because that goes back to what we were saying about the brain and expectations. And, the bed is only for two things, and we're talking kids, so it's only for one thing. And that's sleep, Anybody else have anything to add to how to help the kids in the transitions?
I would say doing those things and then having time for conversation. Just like it's a calm moment, let's just debrief. Because, you've moved from your bed where you were sleeping in to the kitchen table, which was once the kitchen table to eat. Now it's your kitchen table to do your work, to do school, to do all of these things. Let's talk for a little bit, increasing those moments of like just regular talk and conversation. It might be a little bit more, I guess, laborious, because you have to make an effort. It might not be as like, I guess, I don't know, natural or something like that. But it's kind of like making that effort to let's just sit down and talk, And sometimes kids, adolescents, teenagers, they just need that outlet. Like, I just need to blah for a second. And then they're like, oh, okay, now I'm good. And so just giving them that outlet so where they can blah, say what they need to say about the setup with no, I guess, judgment and no like expectation on your part, like not taking offense, and then taking it from there.
Okay. Yeah, and I know with our kids, because we have 2 adult daughters and then Junior, who's 15, but even before all of this, when we had a particular house that had red furniture, and we would call it the Red Room. This was before, what's that series of movies? Yeah, I can't think of it, but it was a book. And then it was movies, like 3 or 4 movies with the black room, but that was before all of that came about. Yeah, Christian Grey. Yeah. So that it was the Red Room. and
50 Shades of Grey.
That's it, 50 Shades of Grey. Somebody was gonna go with it. So when I said
the red fern, the red door.
Right. Because the Red Room, I didn't want it to be a weird reference, but so they could go there and have a conversation with us, like unjudged and almost unfiltered. Now you can't like be in there with a pouty mouth or a potty mouth, but that was their space where they knew if they had something to talk about, they could go and do that. And that's what you're saying, like making that space, or parents learning to hold space for their kids. And it's not gonna feel naturally initially, because most parents, when kids hit teenage years, they want to pull back because they think their kids need space. But kids really need that consistency and that routine not to change on them, so they know when to lean in. So I think that's a always point, but it's definitely important right now with so many things, because they have so much social media. They literally know everything that's going on. Our parents used to turn the news off or be like, don't watch that TV, if they didn't want us to hear something.
Right.
We don't have that. We don't have that privilege. Jenai, you got something you want to add?
I would just say, in the end, remembering also that if they are trying to stay motivated and doing that, have the rewards in place. It sounds crazy that we think about rewarding teenagers, but we all get a reward every either Friday or every other Friday in the paycheck.
It's a great reward.
Come on, right? So that's what keeps us going. That's what keeps us going to work and seeing clients, not just because we love it. We do love it, but it pays well. So they need that as well. Parents, don't forget to give your kiddos and your teenagers affirmations and praise them, right, for getting through this difficult time and for still just showing up every single day that they got to show up. That's huge.
That is. And so this is concluding our part 1, but I need you to come back for part 2, where the CEOs, the powerhouses, are going to show up and give you insight and tidbits of how we run and manage business and balance out our personal lives. So until next week, take care.